fam, good morning. It's Thursday, it's the 30th of October, and today it has been already 10 days since I set out to run a sub 3-hour marathon back in Amsterdam. So, what happened during this race? How was I able to crush the finish line in 2 hours, 50 minutes, and 32 seconds? Everything around this entire race is what I will go over inside this video. And on top of that, I will also explain what my next goal will be for 2026. So with that being said, right now 10 days since we ran a marathon, I have my first interval workout on the track on my schedule, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be 8 times 750 meter repeats with a 3 kilometer cool down and then also a 3 kilometer warm up. So with all that being said, let's head to the track, and afterwards we will break down the entire race, my nutrition strategy, and also what is coming up in 2026.
Right, first 4 intervals of the 8 completed. We right now have 8 more to go, and I definitely, of course, recognize that it has just been 10 days since I had the marathon. Legs somewhat still a little bit fatigued, but nevertheless 4 more to go. 3 kilometer cool down, and then we will go over, of course, everything that happened 10 days ago. All right, guys, so before we head back to home, right now we're in our last 3 kilometer cool down, and we are on the exact same track as you can see, which I was at around 3 weeks ago when I had my last interval workout. And at this exact same spot, I also mentioned that everything that we have done over the past 20 weeks from that point of training, of commitment, of working towards the sub 3-hour marathon, it has paid off in terms of fitness. And the only thing that was left to it was to do it, to run the race and put the cherry on the cake. And to be very honest, this has been one of the most proud moments of my life when I look at accomplishments that I've been able to achieve. Because, 20 weeks of training, and if you're in the same process, or you were, and you look at what you've done consistently by putting in the work, you can be proud, right? Because you've done the job that you needed to do in order to create the outcome that you looked forward to. And this entire marathon, of course, has been documented. It has been uploaded already on basically my previous video, in which I shared everything behind the scenes. But what I want to directly talk about right now, before we head back into the details back home, is that right now, 10 days after the marathon, I'm running my first interval workout, and that is something that, to be honest, 7 days ago I could not see myself do, because my central nervous system, a lot of wind here, my central nervous system was completely taxed. My legs were sore, fatigued, I could barely walk down the stairs. But as of right now, completing my first interval workout, it also shows me the adaptation that our body will create for us if we put in consistent work and we also focus on recovery afterwards. So we are able to push back way faster in order to, of course, reach our next goal. And that's also what we will talk about in this video, what my next goal will be, my next race. So let's dive into it.
Alright fam, so let's dive into the splits that have been provided in this application of the marathon itself. And these splits have been given away at a 5K basis. So the first 5 kilometers have been completed at the 4 minute and 13 seconds minute per kilometer pace. And in a few seconds, I will dive into why this split specifically has been significantly lower than the rest of the 5K splits. Because at 10 kilometers, I ran 4 minutes per kilometer, then 3:57, 4:02, 3:57, 4:01, 4:01, 4:05, and the last 2.5 kilometers at the 4:01 minute per kilometer pace. That totals an overall time of 2 hours, 50 minutes and 32 seconds. This is 9 minutes and 28 seconds faster than my aimed pace to run a sub 3. But the main reason in which I believe I was able to run this race at such a consistent pace is because the first five, especially the first 2 kilometers, I ran way slower than my overall pace. And I did that on purpose. First of all, of course, you also need to be aware when it's your first marathon that the first 2-3 kilometers will always be slower. It is super crowded, people are all over the place, and the only thing that you don't want to do in the beginning is stumble because there are so many people around you. Later down the line, when people are of course separating themselves throughout the course, you have more space to also pace yourself, to basically get ahead and just run negative splits. Because the one thing that I did not want to do, and that helped me significantly, is to not blow up in the beginning. What do I mean by that? I did not want to run a, let's say, sub 4 minutes per kilometer pace splits in the very beginning, because that did not allow me to run negative splits later down the line. If I ran and went out way too fast from the beginning, then I would completely blow myself up, and that would not allow me to, let's say, sustain a steady pace later in the race. So I did this on purpose, so I could pace myself, get used to, let's say, the race, get in the race with a good feeling, and especially run more negative splits or consistent splits, especially in the last 10 kilometers of the race. Overall, 2 hours, 50 minutes, 32 seconds. I'm super grateful. So I woke up at 5 a.m. and at 6 a.m. I already had my first meal. This was 3 hours out from the race. And this meal included 2 slices of sourdough, which was 54 grams of carbs, with 2 tablespoons of jam, which was 30 grams of carbs. On top of this, I added 2 tablespoons of honey, which also had an additional 35 grams of carbs in it. And to finish this off, I added 1 banana, which also provided an extra 30 grams of carbs. So all with all, before taking any supplements, I already had consumed 149 grams of carbs ready available in my system. And then during the race, I had 7 gels, starting with a caffeinated one at kilometer 6, then at kilometer 12, 18, 24, another caffeinated one at kilometer 30, 36, and an additional one at kilometer 40. This in total was 7 times 25 grams of carbs. This in total included 175 grams of carbs during the race. Alright fam, so one of the most important changes that I made compared to my first marathon that happened last year in Madrid, compared to this marathon that happened in Amsterdam, was adding more sodium in my system. So what I did in the morning of the race was waking up with 500 milliliters of water. In there, I added 1 serving of electrolytes, which is an additional 1000 milligrams of sodium. Then, leading up to the race, about 2 hours before the race, I added an additional scoop of electrolytes, and I did the exact same again about 1 hour and 15 minutes before the race even started. So this overall, of course, included 3000 milligrams of sodium. But on top of that, 2 hours before the race, I also added 1 scoop of 1% endurance. This is fuel plus hydration. So besides the carbs that I added in my system through this supplement, I also added an additional 700 milligrams of sodium from 2 servings. So before the race even started, I added close to like 4000 milligrams of sodium in my system. And this might sound way too much. But if there is one thing that you should be aware of in order to prevent cramps during a race, is that just water alone is not going to be sufficient. You're going to basically completely deplenish your sodium levels when you're just consuming water. So what you want to do, and one of the biggest things and changes that I've made compared to my first marathon, was literally adding more sodium in my system before the race. And then of course during the race, I also added an additional 5 to 750 milligrams of sodium every, let's say, hour by consuming electrolyte pills, and also of course what was available on the race in terms of salt tabs, for example. So with all that being said, you're going to consume a lot of sodium, especially on race day. But trust me, that is exactly what your body needs, and what helped me as well significantly to not cramp up and to perform better.
Morning. Right, so let me tell you a story, because people talk about that the most important conversations and the most beautiful things in life happen in good conversations with friends and family. That is what happened to me in December 2023, when I was talking to a very good friend of me, and I asked him what his goals were going to be for 2024. He told me directly, my first personal goal will be to lose 15 kilograms. My second goal will be to run a marathon and to make my father proud. When I heard that first goal, I thought, okay, that is easy. That should not be too hard to lose the 50 kilograms. 15. Then, a few seconds later, when I heard the second goal, I thought he was nuts. Because I was not a runner. I was just someone who would run like only 10 kilometers a week. And I couldn't see myself becoming that uncomfortable to run a marathon for 42.2 kilometers. And then, when we set out the goal together, we told ourselves, let's do something very uncomfortable. And we told ourselves, we're gonna do this together. So, after conversation for a while, we decided to run our first marathon, which happened 5 months after the conversation in Madrid on April 2024. So, what happened later in that conversation is that I asked him which marathon his father ran. And he told me he ran all the 7 major marathons. And I didn't know what it first was. But when I heard 7 marathons, I thought, that is impossible. Like, what was his PR? He said 2 hours, 57 minutes. And when I heard that, it blew my mind. I started doing research after this conversation, and it seemed like many people were actually crushing the sub 3 marathon. And that was something, from that moment, a pivotal moment in my life, because it completely changed my point of view and perspective on what is possible. Because his father, from what I knew, was just a normal man, but he was dedicated to a process. And that's when it all comes down to perspective. Because if you're willing to work your way towards your goals, you can literally achieve anything. If you're willing to put in the work, especially on the days and early mornings that you don't feel like it, when it's raining, when nobody's clapping for you, when it's just you and the empty roads, and you just get the job done, that's when you win. That's when you build and stack confidence by doing the work. So that's also what happened to me when I committed to a 10-month process of consistent preparation. So what happened 4 weeks ago is that I was able to run a sub 251 marathon. And that's something that I will always take with me right now. That's how I'll approach my new goal. And that's what we will talk about in a few seconds from now.
Alright, so there's only one question left, and that is, what is gonna be the next event, the next race, the next goal that I will approach in 2026? And to be honest, I right now have one race on my schedule, which is the Rotterdam Marathon on April 12th of 2026. This will be, for as of right now, the only event that I will have on my schedule, but that does not mean that it can still shift throughout the year, and that I will maybe add another event on maybe late 2026. So as we can see here, the Rotterdam Marathon is always like, it's just a gamble. Are you getting in or not? But luckily I was able to get my bib number and everything already secured. So in 149 days and 16 hours on April 12th, 2026, the Rotterdam Marathon is going to happen in Rotterdam, of course. So this is supposed to be the most, like the fastest, but also the most beautiful marathon in the Netherlands specifically. So I'm super curious, of course, how I will like just feel throughout that entire race, because I've right now seen it from afar. But I'm also very curious how it's gonna be when I'm actually running that race. So I'm super excited for it. It is gonna be net downhill from what I supposed to hear. And my goal for this marathon is to run a sub 245 marathon. I was thinking about maybe going for a sub 240, but as of right now, I want to basically look at it as well realistically, to go for a sub 245. And if I feel great, then it might be that I will run a different race and maybe change the goal throughout the entire prep. So that's my first goal and my only race that I have on my schedule right now, coming up 2026. So this time is going to be slightly different. Everything will be documented up until the 12th of April of 2026. But this time it's not just about me or my time. I want to inspire and guide at least 1,000 people either finish their first marathon or to PR your last one. I want to do that by just literally sharing everything from A to C where I will go through, by providing you the knowledge, experience, and resources that I will learn along the way. From your daily runs to nutrition to recovery, everything will be shared. And so right now, up until the 1st of December, which is 17 days from now, I will just have a lower volume. But once we start on the 1st of December, everything will be shared on this channel. So I can't wait to take you with me. And with that being said, I'm super excited to see you on the first episode.